Our next message this morning will be given by Marilyn Hevelin. I have known Marilyn for at least 15 years. I met her when we were both on staff at Campus Crusade back some, I guess it's 17 years ago, isn't it, Marilyn? 17 years ago that we met. Because of the similarities in our background, and because of the fact that we had both lost children as babies, we both had a reason to care and support one another. I don't know anyone else that's had such a similar situation as Marilyn has had with mine. So we became friends at that time. In the last 10 years, as I have been traveling and speaking, I've not had the time to see Marilyn as much as I would have liked to have done. But when the tragedy that she's going to share with you today happened, I really had to go and let Marilyn know that I cared. And so in this last year or so, we have been back together again, and we've made an effort to see each other. Marilyn professionally is a guidance counselor at the Arrowhead Christian Academy. She's an accredited counselor and teacher, and she's been able to help many parents with the problems that their teenagers have had. It is indeed a problem and a tragedy and just an unbelievable situation that what happened to Marilyn could truly have happened to her. I want her to come up now and share with you and introduce to you a person who has been able to rise above very difficult circumstances in many times, and I know that Marilyn Hevelin will give you some hope.
Thanks, dear. Love you. It was a Thursday evening in February. It had been a busy day. I'd been at school all day. I was tired. I was alone at the house that evening, so I decided to go to bed early. I went to bed, slept soundly, and then suddenly woke up and just sat straight up in bed and knew that something was wrong. I tried to think, where am I? What day is it? Have you ever had feelings like that? You can't collect your thoughts. Finally, I thought, what time is it? And I looked over at the clock, and it was 11:44. I thought, 11:44. Okay, it must still be evening. Glenn isn't in bed with me. It must mean that Nathan is not home yet. And because we had a rule at our house that if our children weren't home, one of us sat up in the evening. Well, it had been Glenn's turn because when he came home, I was already in bed, so he got the job. So I hurried out to the living room and I said, honey, isn't he home yet? And he said, no, he's not. And I said, I've got to share with you the feeling I have. I feel like something's wrong and we've got to find him because he can't find us. And Glenn said, I agree, but I don't know what to do. Well, we started calling, and we called coaches because our son had been at a basketball game that evening. They reported that they had seen him earlier in the evening after the game. They'd all been to McDonald's together. But no one had any report after that. They knew he had taken some children home. We continued calling for almost 2 hours. And by that time, it was after 1 o'clock in the morning. Then I knew something was wrong. We finally called a family whose child might have been riding with Nathan. And I remember as Glenn talked to her on the phone, I was standing in the kitchen beside him, and I heard him say, what hospital is she in? And then I thought, oh, Lord, there's been an accident. As Glenn got off the phone, he started dialing the number for the hospital. And he told me that the woman said she had just received a call from the police that there had been a terrible head-on collision and that all of the teenagers in the car were in the hospital. We called the hospital where this child was, and they said, no, we don't have any mails from that accident. They directed us to another hospital. So we hurriedly called them. And again, the hospital said, yes, we have 2 males at this hospital from that accident, both listed as John Does. Again, I heard Glenn say, does that mean he's dead? And the heart just goes a little lower. And the hospital said, no, he's not dead, but he is unconscious, cannot identify himself. And then they said, Mr. Hevelin, come quickly. Glenn reported to me what they had said. We hurried down the hall, knocked on our older son's bedroom door, hollered at him that Nathan had been in an accident. Please get dressed quickly. We finished dressing and headed for the hospital. As Glenn drove, I prayed. The start of my prayer, though, was simply, God, is it going to happen again? The reason I said that is in our married life, Glenn and I have had 5 children. We had already buried 2 of them. And Nathan was one of the 3 that we had left. I knew the feeling of losing a child. And as we went down the road, I felt that the Lord was already telling me, yes, it's going to happen again. As Glenn continued to drive, then I said, Lord, I don't understand it. I don't know why you've chosen us for this situation, but I have learned from my other experiences. Lord, right now, I'm giving you power of attorney in Nathan's life. You can do whatever you wish. Now, Lord, my desire is that he lives and that he be okay. But if he can't be okay, and if he can't be our Nathan, then it's all right to take him. Do what you want to do. Then I continued on and prayed for the other children, asking that God would heal them. Then I prayed, I guess, a typical mother's prayer. I said, Lord, don't let it be Nate's fault. I knew it wouldn't be his fault on purpose. He was a good driver, but a teenage driver, and you always think maybe their reaction time isn't as good. Maybe he would have made a wrong decision. And somehow that was very important to me, that it would not be his fault. We got to the hospital. It was a county hospital, very different situation than we'd been in before. Took them a long time before it seemed like they even knew we were there. Finally, they asked Glenn to come in and talk to a policeman. He talked to the police. He would not tell him anything about Nathan except that he was still unconscious. The policeman was so shaken he could hardly talk to my husband. Glenn said he really doubted the man would have known his own name at that point. He was so shaken, and so we knew that it had been a terrible scene that this man had witnessed. And so Glenn came out and he said, we know it's Nathan. We've verified it was his car. But he said, the man really didn't tell me anything. But he said, one thing he did tell me is that the accident happened at 11:44. That was the time God had wakened me. I believe that God does give mothers very special instincts. And I knew at that minute, just as Barbara shared when her mother had mentioned that she knew when Barbara ran away, I knew when Nate was in trouble. And I thank the Lord that he awakened me, because I don't think we would have gotten to the hospital in time if we had waited for the police to call us. They never took his license out of his pocket, and so I don't think we would have known until it was all over. We walked around, paced the floor for a while, and finally a security guard came up and said, please clear the halls. We're bringing someone through that we're rushing to surgery. So Glenn and I stood off in a corner and sort of huddled not quite as far away as they wanted us to be and watched. We thought maybe it would be the man from the other car, but as I looked, I could just see a head of brown hair and 2 big feet, and then 3 people on each side of this cart just rushing it through. It was maybe not quite as far as the end of this auditorium from me. I knew it was Nate. I wanted to run to him, but I knew that I couldn't do anything for him at that point. I knew that the doctors were doing the best they could do, so I just said, God, take care of him. And that was the last that we saw Nathan, and he went on the elevator to surgery. A short while later, a nurse came out, verified that was Nathan, explained all of his injuries, many, many injuries, severe brain damage, damaged heart, damaged lungs, and a crushed leg. And I guess because of the experiences I'd gone through before, I'm sure the nurse was surprised at my straightforwardness, but my first question to her was simply, do you think he's going to make it? Her head went down, and she shook her head, no. And I said, okay. And it was just like I needed to know what direction God was going. And at that time, he just confirmed it in my heart. Marilyn, we're going down this path again. So the family came, friends came. We stood around, hugged each other, and prayed. And then I received a phone call from one of the other, from a friend who was at one of the other hospitals with the other children. And she related to me that they had found out that the accident had been caused by a drunken driver. Well, God had answered one of my prayers. It wasn't Nathan's fault. But a drunken driver? I had never paid much attention to that. I knew that we have a problem with alcohol in this society. You hear the statistics of the number of people who die at the hands of drunken drivers. But my Nate? That was so hard for me to relate to. And just this morning, my attention was called to an article, a family totally wiped out. The husband left a wife and 3 children killed at the hands of a drunken driver right here in this area this week. It happens all the time. But now it was happening to me. Very soon after that, the nurse came around the corner and I was standing alone when she came. I helped her out again. I knew what she was going to say. I said, "He's gone, isn't he?" And she said, "Yes, he is." Nate's been gone almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in February. We've faced many struggles through this time. It's been very difficult for us. Obviously, one of the greatest struggle is just learning to live without Nate. He was a wonderful kid. He was 17. He was the last one we had home. In many ways, he was my identity. I was Nathan's mother. I was the mother of one of the students in the ensemble, one of the students on the basketball team, all of these things. And now all of that identity was gone. Things had changed. Now I was simply the counselor at the high school. But I did not have Nathan there. And it was so different to work with his friends, counsel them for graduation, and not have him there. And I guess another adjustment that has been so difficult is just the empty spot at the table. We have gotten to where we can't eat in the dining room unless we have company, because it's just so obvious that it should be 4 instead of 3. And we just don't like it. So we've moved to another room, and we eat in another room now. So that has been a very difficult struggle for us. We miss him a lot. Another struggle was the fact that this accident was caused by someone. It was someone's fault. Nathan's death was someone's fault. And you couldn't just forgive them and go on, but the state makes a decision in this. And the man was charged with manslaughter. That meant that we needed to be part of a manslaughter trial. That's a very difficult thing to go through, too. But the hardest part of it was that we would get all ready for it. We would go, and we would be prepared for the manslaughter trial, and we'd get down there, and they'd say, "Oh, didn't anyone call you? I'm sorry, it's been postponed again." This happened 11 times that we went and were prepared for a trial. We would try to set our calendar around this situation, and then it would be changed. And so our life was not our own in that situation. Then another situation that we had to work with was the insurance. It turned out that the man who hit Nathan had no insurance of his own, which I found is very typical of drunken driver situations. I guess perhaps because it's so hard for them to get insurance, so they drive without it. So he had no protection for us. God had blessed us, and we had a large amount of insurance that would cover all of the teenagers, take care of all of them on the uninsured motorist policy of our insurance auto policy. And so we looked at it, oh, thank you, Lord. We have plenty of money to take care of everyone, to supply everyone's needs, pay all the hospital bills, pay Nathan's bills and everything, because they were large, even though he was there just a few hours, several $1,000s for a few hours. And so we were so thankful for that. And I had the vision of 4 Christian families working together, presenting their needs to the insurance company, having one Christian attorney who had almost volunteered his time to help us, and we would go en masse to the insurance company. And my father had been in insurance, so I had an idea of how you handled these things, and Daddy was there to guide us too. And so we were assured by the insurance company that all of this could be settled within 60 to 90 days, that it would all be taken care of. And to us, it was important to get it done. It seemed like you couldn't go on until you got all these legal things taken care of. Well, after many months of family meetings with the other families and so on, we began to realize we were not going in the same directions. Their goals were not the same as ours. And so finally, after 6 months, we continued with the Christian attorney that we had. The other 3 families opted to hire another attorney to represent the 3 families. So even though I don't think it was intended to be that way, we ended up on opposite sides in a situation that was very difficult. We were very tender in this, and we wanted to get it done. They were slowing down. And that was very hard to handle, too. Also, the fact that I saw their children every day at school. I was to counsel these children, work with these children, and yet I had been advised not to discuss anything about the accident with them, not to talk with them about anything that could be the legal matters. That was difficult. They'd been with my son when he died. I wanted to know everything they knew about the situation. So I felt that I was in an adversarial position when I didn't want to be. And I felt that because of the extra legal action, that they were really casting a feeling of guilt and responsibility on Nathan. Even though I don't think that was true, yet that was my feeling with this continuing on. I became very protective of him, of his reputation, and of his memory. And so, again, it was just a very soft spot and very hard for me to deal with. So the settlement that we had hoped would come in 60 to 90 days finally came after 15 months of personal struggles and hurts. And it was so hard to try to mend everything after all of this. And during this time, I began to realize that we, along with Nathan, were truly victims. We were put into a situation that was not of our own choosing. Through the legal limitations, we were not able to make decisions of our own or on our own. Other people and other agencies were making decisions for us. And so we went through 15 months of this. I couldn't set a calendar, I couldn't plan things, and I'm a very organized person, and it seems that my security comes from this. And all of a sudden, that was gone, along with my son. He was gone too, and all of the hurt that would come with this. I realized I was a victim, and through this now 20 months, I've realized that victims need help, and you are the people that can help them. Those of us around them are the ones that can help. Through vital words and various deeds, we can lead people to victory. It's very important when you go to meet someone and talk with them after they've gone through any kind of sorrow that your words are vital, that they're encouraging, not discouraging. Most of the people that came to us were wonderful, and if they didn't know what to say, then they just held our hand, cried with us, and that was great. That was fine, because most of the time that's what we needed. But some people with very good intentions brought discouraging words. And I would just like to share one experience with you, because maybe some of you even have gone through these things and know how hurtful it can be. Just before Nathan died, I received another phone call at the hospital, and it was a friend who wanted to know how Nathan was doing. Well, by that time, I had accepted what was coming. I just said, the doctor has told us that Nathan will not live. He is dying. I expected her response to be like ours, just being crushed, hurt, disappointed. But her response was different. Her response was, oh no, you can't talk like that. Death comes from Satan, and if you give up like this, then you're giving in to Satan. And if Nathan dies, it'll be because you gave up. I was hanging up from that telephone call as the nurse came around the corner to tell me that Nathan was dead. I knew that woman was wrong. I knew that she did not mean to hurt me. She probably really believed what she said. But those were discouraging words at that time. They did not help. They hurt. And I know that lady wanted to be able to help me through the next 15, 20 months. I couldn't let her. Every time I would see her for the first year, I would dissolve into tears. And I just had such a hard time because all I could hear was, Nathan died because you gave up. I didn't believe that, and yet the fact that she thought that just tore me apart and really hurt me. I don't know if I would have made it through that, except my husband was such a help to me. Right away, he shared with me and he said, Marilyn, just remember, you never gave up on Nathan, but you gave over to God. And I did. I had said, God, you can have power of attorney in Nathan's life. But I had to repeat that to myself so many times as I would see this dear friend. And I know she didn't want to hurt me like that. But if you're not sure that what you're going to say is okay, then just hug them. Just hold their hand. There might have been another time that she could have shared her thinking with me, but that was not the time. So bring encouraging words. It's just very, very important. One of the encouraging people that came to me that really stands out in my mind is Vonette Bright. She was at our home by about 10 o'clock the next morning. And she had been at a prayer breakfast that morning and had shared with the people that she had just received this news about Nathan and how bad she felt and how close we were to each other and what a great loss this was. After the prayer breakfast, someone came up to her, a couple, and said, Vonette, we've got the verse to take to your friend. We want you to take it for us. And so Vonette came to my house excited, even though she was broken for us. She said, Marilyn, somebody gave me a verse this morning that I believe is meant just for you. The verse is from Isaiah. It's from the Living Bible, Isaiah 57, verses 1 and 2. It says, the good men perish, the godly die before their time. No one seems to realize that God is taking them away from perilous days ahead. Those who die in the Lord shall rest in peace. I knew that was my verse because by noon that day, 5 people had brought that verse to us. It turns out that, bless his heart, J. Vernon McGee had given that message on that verse that Friday morning on the radio. And all of these people had heard that verse. Now, I can't tell you everything that verse means yet. I don't know, and maybe I won't know it all till I get to eternity. But there's something in that verse that is telling me that God is saying, Marilyn, it wasn't an accident. I knew about Nathan, and I had a plan for Nathan, and I'm taking him away from something worse. And you know, for the Christian, there are many things worse than death. And for Nathan, we knew that he was safe in the arms of the Lord. And so those were encouraging words to receive. And I clung to that verse. We used it on the program that we had at the funeral, where over 1,000 people attended to remember Nathan. And what a testimony to have this verse on the front of the program. Now, I thank the Lord for people that would bring things like that. Later on, when I was dealing with some of the bitterness, some of the problems that came along the way with everything dragging out so long and so on, my friend Joan Simons wrote me a letter. And she said, Marilyn, I don't know what to tell you because I haven't gone through the same things that you have, but someone who did shared a verse with me or an idea, and I want to share it with you. And the statement was, keep the wound clean. And the day I received that letter was just the perfect timing, and God does have timing. You can trust. If he's telling you to write to somebody or he's telling you to say something to someone, do it, and do it then, because he knows they need it. And that day I needed it. My heart was full of bitterness. I was angry at this whole situation. And yet, when I read this, I thought, that's what I've got to do. I know that the wound is never, ever going to heal if I don't keep it clean. And so I asked the Lord to just help me keep it scrubbed and just dump out the bitterness, not to let the wound fester with bitterness, but to give it over to the Lord. Scrub it out every day if I had to, or every few minutes if I had to, but to give it over to God. And so again, I'm thankful that someone took the time to write to me when they did. Besides vital words, encouraging words, there are other things that all of us can do. There are a variety of deeds that we can share with those who hurt. One thing that we can do that is probably the simplest thing to do, and yet it really does help, and that's bringing food. Now, our house, they estimate that over 600 people went through our home in 1 week, and lots of teenagers, and they wanted to eat, and they were able to eat. I wasn't, but they could eat, and people brought lots of food, and I was so thankful for that. But as they did that, I remembered all the times that I had done that, and I recalled one particular time when a friend of ours had lost their son in a very unusual circumstance. We did not know these people really well, but they were in our church. The man was on the board with my husband. And so as soon as we heard about it, we felt we really needed to go. We needed to go talk to these people. And yet I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome. I didn't know how they were responding to this. So I thought, I'll see what I got in the freezer. And I went to the freezer and I found some of my homemade bread that I make. I pulled out a loaf of bread, and so Glenn and I went to the door of these friends' home, and here I was armed with my loaf of bread. And I like to think of it that way, that I was armed with that bread. That was my protection as I went to see these people. Because first of all, you don't know how they're going to react. People react differently in sorrow, and sometimes they don't want anyone around. But I thought, even if they don't want me around, they'll like my bread. And they'll take my bread, and then I can at least look at them, see them, know if there's anything else I can do. Well, I got to the house, and they were all just sitting. Everyone was in such shock because of the circumstances of this boy's death, a 19-year-old boy, and it was just a very difficult thing for them to handle. And they took my bread quickly, were glad to have that, but also welcomed me in. But then I started asking, has the pastor been called yet? Have friends from out of town been called? Are there any plans for food? No. All of the friends that normally would have done this for them were in such shock that they were just sitting there too. They just couldn't think what to do. So I was far enough removed from it that I could think what to do. So I said to Glenn, go on home, take care of the kids, and I'll call you when I'm ready to come home. I called him at 10 o'clock that night. I had been there all day. I went back the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and stayed from about 8 in the morning till about 10 at night. I helped the woman make plans for food in the home. I also helped her clean out that teenage boy's room. That was something I could do. Other people wouldn't have been able to do that. She trusted me. She knew I had lost children before. It was okay for me to be there and do that. It took her several days before she asked me, but then she was able to trust me enough to let me do that. When Nathan died, one of the first people at our door was that man from that family, and he was armed with a ham. He wasn't sure what his reaction would be either in his welcome, but he came in, and how neat to be able to share with him and know that he understood what we were going through. So that's something we all can do. You can go armed with a pie or a cake or a loaf of bread or just some fresh flowers or any little thing, but it gives you that opportunity to see what's happening in that home and see if there are other things that you can do to help. And people always appreciate your kindness, even if they don't want you to stay. They just appreciate you coming. There were some girls from the school that cleaned my house for me. They cleaned my house right after the funeral and for the next couple weeks, and then they continued on. And until June of that year, every Saturday, these two teenage girls were at my house and cleaning it for me. Well, usually I don't have any problem cleaning my house, but in the last year, I have not been very organized, and running a sweeper or cleaning a bathroom is of least importance to me right now. I'm doing well just to function in my job, and so it was so nice that I didn't have to worry about that these girls had come, and they didn't even want to accept any money for it. They just wanted to be able to do it in memory of Nathan. People brought pictures to us, and that meant so much. We had lots of pictures. We are picture takers, but to have different poses, different views than we had meant a lot to us. And we have almost an album full of pictures that people brought of their kids with Nathan. people laminated articles. There were many large articles in the paper about Nathan, and they laminated those and brought them to us so we could keep them forever, or we could send them to someone and they would be preserved. And then people recalled memories. This is one of the greatest things that people did for me, was sharing what Nathan meant to them. That just meant so much. One of the girls from the school wrote, and this is a note from one of Nathan's classmates, Sue, and she wrote, "One of the things that I continue to be thankful for is the precious memories I have of Nate. I miss walking through the halls and singing with Nate. He always had a song that he would share. He often asked me how he could help when no one else knew I was down. He carried my burdens. He was and is a dear friend. I just wanted you to share my thankfulness." That's one of the greatest things you can do. It's so neat to know that someone else misses him, that someone else remembers the good things about him, because he was a typical teenager, but there were lots of good things about Nate. And some of the things I learned here that I didn't even know. I learned some of the songs he sang in the halls that I hadn't heard before, and it was sort of neat to just see the humor in Nathan. And that was fun. That was exciting to have people share these things. Then another family shared with us that after Nathan died, they had a moratorium on television at their house for a couple weeks, just to remember the agony that we were going through, just to honor Nathan and just remembering how special he was. The teenagers in their home suggested that they shut off the television set. Now, that was a wonderful thing for them to do, but the greatest thing they did was tell us about it so that we could know that someone else thought that much of Nathan and cared that much about our sorrow that they were willing to share that with us. And for teenagers to turn off the television set, that's quite a sacrifice, and that was just so touching to me. I had a friend, Nancy, who was with us from 3 o'clock on Friday morning until midnight that night, and then almost continuously from then on for several weeks. She made all the phone calls for us that we couldn't make, telling all the people about Nathan. We had people all across the United States that needed to be told. She made all of those calls for us, called the insurance company for us, just did so many things that we could not deal with. Our mind wasn't functioning like that. It took us so long even to remember who you should call. And yet then Nancy would continue on with it. That helped us so much. But more than that, about 3 weeks later, Nancy came to me with a legal pad and a tape, a cassette tape, and she said, "Here's the start of your book if you ever decide to write about this." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I've been taking notes ever since Nathan died. I've been writing down everything that's happened at this house. I've been writing down your comments and your reactions, your feelings about certain people that came, all the details that were in the paper, all the different things that have been going on. I've written them all down. Then I also made a tape just of my own impressions of what has happened because it has touched me so much. Now here it is. You can read it or listen to it whenever you're ready." Well, it took me 6 months before I was ready. I couldn't even touch it for a while. But I never thought I would forget some of the things that happened during that special 2 weeks. But when I started to listen to Nancy's tape, I discovered there was a lot I'd already forgotten that would have been lost, but it's there now, so that whenever I do write, and Florence keeps working on me, I will get that book written. But when I do, there's a start. I know how to get going. Again, that's something anyone could do that was around. Anyone that was close to a family that's suffering could do things like this for them. And they can't think to do these things by themselves. This last June would have been Nathan's graduation from high school. I'm the academic counselor at that high school. My major job at graduation is to hand out all of the scholarships, all the awards to valedictorians, all this sort of thing. I have probably about half of the graduation ceremony as my responsibility. I wasn't sure I'd even make it to graduation. It was going to be difficult for me. And then I kept wondering, do other people remember? Are they thinking what I'm going through? Do they feel for me? Or are they so involved in their own graduation and their own joy that they don't realize what I'm missing tonight, that Nate isn't here? But very quickly, God let me see that others were remembering. I got to graduation and found out that one of the girls from the graduation class had stopped by on her way to school and left flowers on Nathan's grave. That means a lot to a mom, too. It means a lot that somebody else cared to do that, to even take time to go out to the grave was very special. Then at graduation, we have the tradition that we hand out roses to the parents of the students, and we have all the students walk down, and a couple of the teachers hand roses to them, and then they give them to the parents. It was my job, now I realize by design, I thought I had just fallen into it, but anyway, it was my job to give roses to the students for them then to give them to their parents. Well, you can imagine the thoughts that were going through my mind as I was handing out roses. One of these should be mine. I wonder how Nate would give it to me. He'd probably be giggling when he did it. I wonder if he'd trip over his size 11 feet. There were just all kinds of thoughts were coming, but mostly it was, I want a rose. I just miss him, and I want a flower. Well, all the kids came back up on the stage, sat down, and I looked up, and here were two of the girls from the senior class coming with a bouquet of roses for me. That helped me in so many ways. First of all, it released the whole audience and me to cry together. Before that, I just said, Lord, just get me through my part so that I don't cry during that, because it would be me crying alone up here while 3,000 people are watching me. But when everyone watched these girls walk across that stage, then I was not crying alone. Everyone was crying. We got through it, got over it, and it was fine. But then I had those beautiful roses as a reminder that teenagers remembered, teenagers cared. And that meant a lot to me, that his friends had remembered. And I could even see a plan in this then, that God was doing something special with these kids. He was making them much more sober than most teenagers would be, especially on graduation night. But they had been touched by Nathan's death, and they had a maturity that most kids don't have. But I could just see a glimmer of God's plan through them, and I just appreciate their kindness. Then I have a friend, Joan. In fact, she's here today, and I appreciate her coming. Joan did not know me well. Her children were close friends of Nathan's. Joan went to our church, and she came up to me a few weeks after Nathan died, and she said, I just want to tell you that I appreciate the way you are allowing this new church to watch you grieve. You are sharing with us. You are letting us see what your needs are. You're letting us see when you have a hard time. We're learning to understand the process of grief through you. And then she said, because of that, I'm wondering, could you spend some time with me? Could I take you out to lunch sometimes so that I could learn more about this? The psychology was wonderful. It wasn't, let me take you out so I can help you, honey. It was, you can help me. Will you go with me and teach me and help me? Sure, I was glad to do that. And because she put me in a position where I was free to admit, sure, I'd love to do that. So Joan and I made a commitment together that every 2 weeks we would go out to lunch. Well, at that time, when I made that commitment, I had no idea of all the things we were going to be facing, the struggles with the insurance and all these things that would be so frustrating. But as Joan and I went out to lunch, there were many days that I thought, if I can just hang on until Wednesday, when I go to lunch with Joan, I'll be okay, because I can tell her how I feel about these things. I knew I could share with Joan. I could tell her anything. I could say I was mad. I could say I was upset, and it was all right. It wouldn't go any further, but Joan and I could pray about it. She would know how to pray with me later. And so she was sort of like my release valve. And Joan and I still go to lunch. What was really neat is a couple weeks ago, though, she called and she said, I need you. She was having a hard time. And so finally, I really could help her, too, even though Joan's been helping me so much during this time. I had another friend who was expecting her 6th child when Nathan died. Her oldest son was Nathan's best friend. and then she had 4 girls, and now she was expecting another child. Obviously, Donna Lynn didn't have a whole lot of time to spend with me. She couldn't come to my house or take me out to lunch. She had plenty to do at home. But that didn't stop her from helping me. She said, Marilyn, come on over to the house. I've got some things you can help me do. And so I would go to Donna Lynn's house and I would do some typing for her, or some cooking, or walk the kids, or whatever she needed done, I would do. And then we would have time to share with each other. And she could minister to me without it taking a whole day. And also, again, gave me that feeling that I was being useful to someone else, because my mind wasn't working well yet. I didn't feel like I was doing my job well at school, but at least there I could carry a baby, I could walk with him, I could do that, I could walk a 4-year-old, I could type most of the time. So there were things that I could do. And so Donna Lynn included me in her busy schedule. And it's fine to call people who are hurting and saying, I need somebody to help me on something. Come on over, and then we'll have tea together, or we'll talk together. That makes them feel useful. They don't feel just like a charity case. But they can do something for you too, and they need to feel useful. We had a special situation at Christmas. Nathan's birthday is Christmas Day. That was going to be a hard time for me. I remember sharing with some students that I had taken to Biola that for a weekend, how this year I really had thought I'd like to ask God to just cancel December. Let's try it again next year, because I just didn't know how I was going to make it. The next morning at Biola, I was going through their bookstore, and I love posters. I have them all over my office at my school. As I looked at the posters, there was one, and I just called my friends over and said, look at this. And it was a beautiful rose. You could still see the dewdrops on it, and the whole poster was the rose. Down at the bottom, it had this little verse that was just for Marilyn that day. It said, God gave us memories so we might have roses in December. That was a promise. That was a promise. Needless to say, we all bought one of the posters. We all have them framed, and they're in our homes. And how I thank the Lord for that he said, I'm not going to cancel December, but you're going to have roses in December. It's going to be okay. One of the roses that I had was Christmas morning. My son-in-law called my attention to the fact that there was a note on the Christmas tree. I pulled the note down, and it was addressed to Nate in care of Mom. As I opened the note, it was from my son-in-law and my daughter. They said, we want you to know how much we miss Nate too. We want you to know how much we appreciated him. So every year, we're going to do something in memory of Nathan for someone else at Christmas. This year, we have taken a basket of food to a needy family and told them that it was in memory of our brother. That's a rose. That was beautiful. We have all decided to do that in our family now. And so we are sending a boy to basketball camp every year in memory of Nathan, and that's the rose that we put on the tree. So Christmas really can have roses. There really can be roses in December. We surrounded ourselves with people on Christmas, and I'm very thankful those people recognized our need and were willing to come. Many times at Christmas you say, oh, I don't have time. We always have our family time then, and they wouldn't want to come over, but these people saw our need. And so they brought their families, and they came, and we had about 25 people in our home on Christmas. And I can honestly say that Christmas was a wonderful time. Nathan was celebrating his first birthday in heaven, and we were doing okay, and we had some beautiful roses. And then one of the things that people did was just let me cry. There were times I'd call people and I couldn't even tell them who I was. The minute I heard their voice, I would just burst into tears. And all I could do was cry, and I couldn't tell you why. I was just crying. And it was so neat that they didn't say, well, you ought to be over that. What's wrong with you? Some people did that, but these friends didn't. They just said, it's okay. It's okay. Go ahead and cry. So sometimes maybe that's all you'll be able to do for someone, is just let them cry. But do that. It's very, very important. Our pastor was of an extreme help to us. First of all, the greatest thing he did was when we called, he came immediately. He didn't say, "I'll see you in the morning." He came at 3 o'clock in the morning. By the time we got to the house, he was there with the youth pastor. By 4 o'clock in the morning, we had 40 people in our living room, and we were having a prayer meeting. And we were thanking God for the memories and thanking God for sparing the lives of the other children and just asking God to get us through this. But we had all of these people, and our pastor was leading it. After that, we knew he was a very busy man, and we knew he didn't have time to come and see us all the time, and so I just figured, well, we'll probably just have to muddle through this by ourselves. But that isn't the way Pastor Miller did it. He didn't have time to come and see us every day, but every night for several weeks, between 9 and 10 o'clock, we could be sure we were going to get a phone call from Pastor Miller. He would call and he'd say, "Get on the extension," so we were both on. And then his first question would be, "What happened today?" Well, we'd tell him whatever it was. Some days it was a good day, some days it was terrible, and we'd share that with him. And then he'd say, "How do you feel about it?" So we'd share our feelings. Sometimes there'd be tears with that. And then he'd say, "What's happening tomorrow?" So we'd tell him what's happening tomorrow. And then he'd say, "Okay, let's pray." So then he would pray with us on the phone. That was just as good as a visit. It was wonderful. It was private. It was just us. Then the next thing he would say is, "Now, go to bed and have a good night's sleep." Many nights, just because he directed us that way, we went, even though we probably wouldn't have had sense enough to go to bed. We did need the rest, and just his instruction helped us to just sort of follow and do that. We appreciate the constancy that he had in working with us. We did a lot of things that helped too. First of all, we tried to meet others with similar experiences. We found ourselves drawn to people who had lost children, and God seemed to be bringing them to us too. You could be more open. You could share some feelings with them that maybe you couldn't share with anyone else. So we found several friends like that. Then we traveled. Now, some of you might not be able to travel. We thank the Lord that he allowed us last year to do a lot of traveling. But anyone can go out of town, maybe to the next town, and stay overnight in a motel. And sometimes that's what you need, is just to get away from the telephone, get away from everyone. And we did a lot of this. We had always had that habit, but now we did it even more. We read a lot of books, and there are a couple I would like to recommend to you. The first one that we found very helpful was Joe Bailey's book, The Last Thing We Talk About. Another one that helped us is by C. Everett Koop, Sometimes Mountains Move. Excellent story of the death of his son. And then a book that I think probably helped me the most of any of the books was the book by Johnny Erickson, A Step Further. Again, God directed me to that book at a time when I needed it right then. No one gave it to me. I stumbled on it in the store and just was standing waiting to pay for some other things. Saw it, picked it up and grabbed it, took it home. It's been wonderful. God used that book in my life in many areas, but particularly the section where Johnny talks about the rungs of suffering. And she talks about the situation that we have, that wherever we are on the ladder of suffering, that we tend to feel that ours is the greatest suffering around, and that we're at the epitome of suffering. That helped me understand why the other families did not seem to have the compassion that I thought they should have had. Why couldn't they understand what this was doing to us? Why couldn't they understand that we needed to hurry and get this done? And then I began to realize that they'd never been there. They couldn't understand. They had not been in that situation. The worst thing they'd ever had was have their child hurt in an accident. They had never lost a child. They could not understand that. And so I said, God, forgive me for my attitude toward them. Help me to be compassionate to them. Help me to share how I'm feeling so maybe they can understand a little more. But then God worked in my life even more and said, Marilyn, you tend to do the same thing they're doing. I said, what do you mean? I'm really compassionate, Lord. I really understand when people are suffering. He said, well, if they've suffered the same amount you have or a little less, but there are people that have suffered a lot more than you have, Marilyn. I had to think about that a minute. I wasn't sure that was true. I thought, I've lost 3 children, Lord. But then he said, Marilyn, you don't know what it's like to be a Johnny Erickson. You don't know what it's like to be in a wheelchair for all the rest of your life. You don't know what it's like to suffer through a divorce. You don't understand what it's like to sit by a child for 2 years who's in a coma. I had to say, you're right, Lord. I don't, and maybe I've been judgmental with those people. And so I had to ask God to forgive me and make me compassionate in those situations, not have the attitude that I was at the epitome of suffering, but there are others in greater need and people that I can help and share with. And so I think in my personal life during this situation, Johnny Erickson's book probably helped me into the turning point of my attitudes toward the other people. Now, that did not change the situation. The insurance struggles were still there, but I understood them in a different way, and I at least tried to be compassionate toward them. My family helped. My son helped in a way that I didn't think was a big help when he did it. He came home and said, Mom, I bought you something. I bought you an answering machine. I hate answering machines. I don't like it when I call somebody and you get this little recorded message from them. I do not appreciate that. But he said, Mom, the times you get the most upset are some of these phone calls that you get that you don't need to handle. Dad could handle them when he got home. So please, let us help you this way. And so I said, all right. And so we went ahead and we got the answering machine. It has protected me from many situations, and I've just really appreciated that Matthew saw my need and was able to help me. Then Glenn helped me in recognizing when there were times that I could not handle things on my own, or times that I had had enough and that I needed to back off. I did not need to go to all those family meetings. I did not need to come home totally distraught. And I have found where husbands will take a stand and help wives realize that they've had enough, that the wives will heal more quickly. And it really did help with me because he could be more objective about the situation than I was. So as pastors, as counselors, and as friends, we need to try to communicate certain things. First, we need to give encouraging words. We need to help the people in all the different kinds of deeds, the unique things that you can do personally. But the main thing I hope that you will communicate to them is it's okay to grieve. It's necessary to grieve. You're not going to heal unless you go through this process. I had a friend who lost her home in one of the Southern California fires. She shared with me that 25 years before that, she had lost a child. He had died at birth. She had never properly grieved for that child because she was in a group of people that tried to tell her that as Christians, we don't have to go through that. Everything is fine, you just ignore it and go on. And so she had, but it didn't work. When she lost the house, there were Christians around her that said, it's okay to grieve. It's all right even to grieve for a house. And she found as she was grieving for the house and was open in this grief that she was actually now, after 25 years, grieving for this child that she had lost. And she said, finally, I was able to bury that child. So please communicate that to people. It's all right and it's necessary to grieve. Then recognize that there may be some other real problems in this family. Anytime there's a stress or a grief situation, there's probably going to be a stress on the marriage. Compassionate Friends, which is a support group for bereaved parents, stated in 1980 that 70% of couples who go through the loss of a child end up in divorce within the first 5 years. You need to recognize that statistic when you're talking with people, that there's going to be stress in their marriage. Talk with them. Ask how they're doing with each other. Are they talking? What's going on? Also recognize there may be some problems with their children. Discipline problems are very likely to come up because the children are suffering too. Glenn and I found also that we both reacted to the situation so differently. And so we had more stress in this death than we did in the other two. I think the other two, it was just a clean ending, and then you could go on. With this one, it was not that way. You didn't know if it was ever going to end as far as the legal things and so on. And Glenn reacted to that differently than I do. Glenn reacts very calm. He leaves room for other people to do their thing and have their opinions about things. I'm not that way. When I get upset with people, my attitude is, Tell them how you feel. Tell them off first, then you can forgive them if you want to. So Glenn said, no, you can't do it that way. Don't do that. We've got to keep peace with these people. So instead of getting mad at the people, I got mad at Glenn. And so we would find that we'd walk around the block and walk around the block and walk around the block, and sometimes it'd be 7 times around the block like you're waiting for the walls of Jericho to tumble before we could even speak to each other because the tension was so strong between us. Now, if we hadn't had friends that recognized this could happen, we would have been in real trouble. But we had friends that were counseling and saying, are you talking to each other? How are you doing? And checking with us, and it helped so much, and we really needed this. There may be guilt with the people too, and you need to recognize this. Whether it's deserved or not, there may be feelings of guilt. And so you need to encourage them to resolve it, talk about it, find out if there's anything they can do to alter their attitudes, and then give it to the Lord. Others around those people may have guilt. We discovered that one of the problems with the other families, one of them shared with me, was simply they felt so guilty that it was our child instead of theirs. And they had a difficult time with that. We had already lost 2. Why would God take a 3rd one of ours and not take any of theirs? And so they tended to pull away from us. So share this with people also, that there may be guilt. It may not be justified by anything, but help them to deal with that. Then know that it's going to take longer than you expect. It's always going to take longer. It never ends. It's always there. It's always going to be a fact that there was a Nathan and an Ethan and a Jimmy, and they aren't here. That will be a fact as long as I live. But I can get to where I can deal with it. In C. Everett Koop's book, he has a statement that God has never promised that he will take away the void, but he has promised he will make the void bearable. And that's what's important for the people to understand. But there will come a time when there's victory. There will come a time when you feel that maybe life is worth living again. I'm still in that process. It's still fresh. Nate hasn't been gone very long yet. But I know that there will come a time when I'll be able to look forward to Christmas again. There will come a day when I won't stumble over the simple question, and how many children do you have? I still don't know how to answer that. I go 5, 4, 3. I don't know what to say. But someday, it will be comfortable to say 2. Someday I won't cry when I watch a high school basketball game. Maybe a long time, but someday that'll come. God is aware. He will use our situations to produce good. We can be sure of that. Recently, I had a chance to share with a woman at a funeral. I had to attend a funeral of another young man who died at the hands of a drunken driver. That was hard for me to do, but I knew I needed to be there, so I was there. I thought I was going to minister to the young wife and her 5-month-old baby. Turned out God had other plans. He brought me to a lady whose children I had known, but I had never met her. After the time at the cemetery, we had talked several times during that week, but at the cemetery, she came up to me and she said, I need to talk with you. And I said, fine, what about? And she said, I'm ready to make a step with God, and I think you can help me. And I said, oh yes, I think I can. So that night at Marie Callender's over pie, I was able to lead my friend Sandy to the Lord. Through her tears later, she said to me, you know, Nathan may be gone, but his life lives on. And that is so true. God is still using Nathan. Nathan is still a reality. He was here. Nathan left me a hope, too. The last day I saw Nathan, he was trotting backwards down the hall. That is a special feat I think only size 11 shoes can do or something. But he was running backwards, talking to me and trying to get his basketball uniform. And I said, Nate, what time will you be home tonight? And he said, oh, I don't know, Mom. It's going to be late. And then he gave me all the hope that I'm clinging to as he said, don't worry, Mom. I'll see you later.